Please welcome Joseph Lake.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? So good morning and welcome. So that's a great setup, thank you, Louis. I think the hockey analogy fits perfectly. I like what you said, that we're all part of the same team. And so what's important is thinking about collaboration. So I want to start off this morning with a few questions, just to get you thinking, put you in the mood. So if you were to ask yourself this question, how effective is your organization at collaboration? How effective are you personally at collaboration? And does collaboration even matter? If you don't mind, take a moment. I'm actually going to encourage you to be using your phones for a few seconds here. We have a short poll. And while you're doing that, let me just state that at CFIN, we absolutely believe that collaboration in the food sector is imperative. It's imperative to continue advancing and evolving the industry to solve major challenges around the world, including nutrition, food security, environmental impact, consumer demands, supply chain challenges, and on and on and on. Not only challenges, but also opportunities for the fresh, the new, the things that we've never done before. Those don't generally happen in isolation. This concept of a light bulb and an apple falling on your head of invention is false. It really requires collaboration. So that's why we wanted to kick off today's conversation around collaboration for an event like CFIST Alt, where we're talking about what's fresh and what's new and what's going on in this food industry and how we work together. So hopefully you've all had a chance to scan the poll. Let me just briefly introduce CFIN and myself. So my name's Joe Lake. As mentioned, I'm the CEO here at CFIN. And really, quite simply, our vision is just to champion a collaborative food innovation culture that generates transformative opportunities. It's simple, it's lofty, it's big, but that's what we believe in. And today we're going to talk a bit about some of the things that we've done that we hope are insightful or potential tools for you, but also some of the challenges that are being illuminated to us and why we're moving in some of these directions. So it's not a secret. I already said we believe collaboration matters, right? It's particularly important in innovation and research, and often those are intertwined, but it's certainly important. We've all likely been part of teams where collaboration has strengthened, accelerated, improved, or even allowed a particular project to come to completion. Of course, that's when it works. We've also all probably been part of collaborations that are disastrous, that are stressful, confusing, problematic, makes you want to just kind of pick up and leave, and sometimes that happens. So again, we're going to talk about some of those things. One of the observations we've seen within our great country in Canada is it's big. It's physically large. And because of that, we see regionalized ecosystems that sometimes are tough to get across. Unlike Europe or Asia and some smaller countries, we can't hop on a train or an Uber for an hour and meet the entire country. I can't go have a coffee with my comms director in BC tomorrow, not without a lofty Air Canada bill. It doesn't work that way. We've got multiple time zones, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the challenges. I'm preaching to the choir when I say also that the food sector is multifaceted, it's fast-paced, it's dynamic, it's consumer-facing, and there's little time often to build into your calendar collaboration, innovation to go after those new concepts. But we see that Canada has a lot of assets, a lot of intelligence, a lot of experience, and there's a lot to do in terms of collaboration. I already stated that collaboration is difficult. Our little friend COVID did not improve things any. How easy was it for you to collaborate from a new digital platform that you've maybe never heard of until, March 2020, when maybe your IT team threw something at you called Zoom or Teams or Google Meet, or Lord knows, maybe you were using Facebook app. I have no idea what some of you might have been using. Might not even be using the same thing today. Maybe you've changed organizations. How did this help? It didn't. It stifled internal collaboration within organizations. There's some data up here, I won't go into the details, but basically the take-home message, it's not easy to work internally from home. But it's not frivolous either around this research that we've seen from Frost Nixon. And collaboration, companies that are collaborating are 30% more innovative, and they're 36% more productive. So if your collaboration's going down, so is your innovation, and so is your productivity. One of the things we've done at CFIN is we've invested in digital tools. And we're going to explain one of them to you, but also internally, we've done training, purposeful training. We are a virtual organization. We don't have a home base on purpose. We are putting ourselves in this quote-unquote negative position. But we've put our teams through training on how to utilize the digital technologies. In our particular case, we are Microsoft users and Teams. And what we found even just yesterday, Jairo down here in the audience was providing some of our measurements. We measure, by the way, that's how we know, is that we're above the average of Microsoft users and think of their database on our ability to collaborate as a team. It's baked right into our psyche and our conscious on how we collaborate internally. And we'll speak to some of those a little bit later on, a little bit of foreshadowing. So we mentioned about the geography, right? That's part of it. Recently, we did a focus group with some of our members. And this is what we learned. This is where some of the key struggles, if we were to put them into a theme. The first one, it's about that regionality as mentioned. It can be difficult to collaborate outside of a particular geographical region. It says province up there. Sometimes it's municipal. It can get that small. Sometimes it's within a particular circle of groups. But that can be a challenge to get outside of that local ecosystem. It's twofold. There's some pros in that, right? There's some positives when you've got a nice humming sort of system that's localized. But often that can shield you from seeing what might be across the country, neighboring province, maybe another university or college, or an accelerator that you weren't aware of that's actually better suited to be working with, right? The second thing that we found out is that it's hard to find the relevant news and information, particularly around food innovation, food research, that pertains to Canada. Okay, Google is a fantastic tool, but we've all been lost in Google. It's not easy. There's no central database or repository for some of this information, okay? The other thing too is some of the news and insights that you see have an agenda tied to them, right? They're not necessarily neutral. They're pushing for something. That's not right or wrong. It's just an observation. And that's what we're hearing. And then this last one I think we can all appreciate is that many companies are really trying to solve some of the similar issues, but they're going at it alone. Not necessarily on purpose. This is sometimes just blissful ignorance, right? Just don't know what your neighbor's doing. You might even be working across the street from another food player, maybe it's a supplier, maybe it's a shipping company, and you might have similar issues, and you've never even had a hello conversation. This is happening, and it's not necessarily multiplying the opportunities around some of these problems. It really is quite a challenge. So I'm preaching to the choir here. Food sector is important to Canada. Right? It's very important to Canada, sometimes downplayed even. But it means a lot. And we firmly believe that through further collaboration, we're going to get further innovation, further productivity, just as that data states. There's only up to go as we continue to collaborate. So at CFIN, our goal is to provide some tools and solutions. They're not one size fits all. We know we need multiple opportunities and options to do this. So we've set out to create some ways to help collaborate on a national scale. And we've done this by designing the organization in a hybrid manner. And what I mean by that, and not to sort of be confused with hybrid working, but hybrid between human and digital, okay? As mentioned, we are spread out across the country. We don't have a headquarters, and that was designed on purpose. And in the audience, you're going to see one of our, I'll call them special weapons, and that's our Regional Innovation Directors. Could you put your hands up for a second, Regional Innovation Directors? They are all, there's two over there, there's Tyson back there, and the other two are probably floating around outside there. So our Regional Innovation Directors are our human element. Human element can't disappear, cannot replace technology. That's what we're learning. We often say our Regional Innovation Directors are boots on the ground, okay? They are in the wild, as we say. They're going around meeting companies such as yours. They're meeting, universities, colleges, accelerators, financial institutions. Even that periphery around, we have a big thesis around the periphery of the food sector, not just the traditional players, but you've got digital technologies, AI, robotics that are starting to come into the space, and rightfully so. So that human connection allows us to get a real-time pulse. It also brings in the gut feel on things. It allows you to meet personalities. It allows you to do warm handshakes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very important. On the flip side, we've purposefully, not accidentally, purposefully built digital tools, okay? The first one, and we're gonna talk a little bit about this, is called YODL. It's not an acronym, it just literally means yodel, like to scream from the top of a mountain. And that's the way we think of collaborating, right? There is an element of, speaking it out loud. And YODL is an online platform or hub that brings our members together. It is meant to take that geography, and Dana, our Chief Experience Officer, always liked to use this analogy, and fold the map. Kind of like space travel or any of those wormhole kind of things. I'm a bit nerdy, I can say these things. Is you can just get from one side to the other instantly. You don't have to get on that flight from Newfoundland. I met somebody who's a lab in Memorial here this morning, Raymond, over there. If he wants to go talk to UBC, that's a couple of flights in 8 hours and probably 3 days for a 1-hour meeting. Maybe that's worth it. It probably is worth it at some point, but you can accelerate that on our digital platform, okay? The other thing too is we're bringing events as well, experiences, things that provide thought leadership, but lastly also programming. And I don't want to speak too much about that, but very simply, that's funding, right? So what can you do on YODL? As mentioned, it's a digital hub, and really it's designed to connect, to learn, to participate, to find other individuals. Not only could you update your LinkedIn profile with your headshot out there, we could encourage all of you to take a headshot and update your profile on our YODL platform as well. When you see these smiling faces on there, it's actually a wonderful way to start to connect with folks. And one of the reasons why would you come to YODL instead of going to, say, LinkedIn, is we're short-circuiting all the noise that's on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's fantastic, but we're zeroing into the things that you care about. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit of a second. So on YODL, if you come around the circle from, say, the 1 o'clock position, is we're stimulating thought leadership. So one of our goals is to seed conversation and seed discussion, to get people thinking about things that they maybe aren't thinking about, or encourage it, catalyze it. We like that word, catalyze it, to help accelerate it. And we do that through original content, CFIN live experiences. Maybe some of you have seen our robotics in action. If you haven't, go back onto our YouTube or onto YODL and find it. It's well worth it. But we also have lots of guest authors and blogs and articles. And to me, it's fantastic. We're only 8 weeks into this platform, and it's already loaded through great information that's going to get you thinking. Okay? That's part of innovation. That's part of collaboration. If you're not stepping outside from behind your desk and challenging what you know today, you're not going to move forward. But we also have conversation highlighted in the green. And that's why we've built this platform as well. It is discussion driven. And it's discussion driven by you, by our members. That's the point. It's meant to have everybody come in and ask a question, find a collaborator. Where's a piece of equipment? How can I do this test? Does anybody else have a similar experience with a new ingredient? Or what's your experience working on that lab? We're looking for a new talent, that kind of thing. It's driven by our members. And so come on in and have that conversation. In terms of collaboration, we're designing, and some of these things are yet to launch, but we're starting to design specific activities and events, both digital and in person. Again, we have that luxury of being national. We can get out there and keep it a little bit regional, but we can also filter it back up to that national scale. And I think that's also important as we start to push on the collaboration front. And then lastly, money, right? Funding. We're actually able to invest money into these projects that are demonstration of collaboration, innovation, and research. Actually put some money in there and get it moving. And so altogether, that's what's happening on our YODL platform. And the good news, we launched it June purposefully. We kind of did it in the summertime when most people have their feet up on a chair on a dock with a beer, not generally in front of their laptop. We did that on purpose. We kind of wanted to soft launch it and get some of the attentive eyes on there. But even in that sort of warm summertime, we managed to get up to 1,800 members. We have over hundreds starting discussions on YODL. It seems to be working. This is just some hints here of what you might see on there. If you don't see a conversation that you're interested in, get in there and seed it. Find some others. We guarantee if one person has a question, somebody else does, and that's how it's going to multiply. From that same focus group that I mentioned earlier, what are our members saying? Well, really, they're starting to say, hey, we can actually get out of some of those blind spots. We're finding new collaborators. We're finding new partners. It's quicker. So this is actually, some good news. Jamil, if you don't mind, could I get you to show me the poll results? What are we seeing here? Adjust your attitude and facilitate clarity. Hey, I like that. That's good. The answer to this is there's no right answer, right? These are actually all important. And if you don't mind, Jamil, I'm going to walk everybody through some of these because, spoiler alert, these are my 5 tips for collaborating. So let's start with adjust your attitude. This is probably my favorite one. If you want to collaborate, you need to come in with an open mind. The very nature of collaboration is trying to do something differently. And if you think it's going to work the way you want it to work, you're probably wrong and you should stop. Take a breath, readjust your attitude, okay? You should go in with a mindset of learning. Patience is going to be required. It's not going to go smooth. You're going to hit roadblocks, particularly between multiple companies. They're going to, one uses Teams, one uses Zoom, one can take a credit card, the other one only can use a PO. You're going to find all these roadblocks. But you can't let that be what brings it down if your attitude is around learning, it's around being open-minded and working together. I think 2 key ones too here is in collaboration, and I've been in some of these, you probably have been too. Don't be in a collaboration if you want to be the smartest one in the room or the smartest organization in the room. If you're there doing the gorilla beating on your chest like a silverback, that's not going to be working together. Inevitably in a collaboration, you likely have to concede something, right? That's the point. There's going to be mutual benefits. However, there's a converse to that. I've seen these as well. Don't be the one that's looking to ride the coattails, pick up the cracker crumbs, maybe even have the full cracker without doing a damn thing. That also will drive a wedge right down the heart of a collaboration. It all sounds simple, right? But does anybody think about these kinds of things before you go into a collaboration, right? Second one, moderate the approach. I find this happens a lot, is you go too big too fast. Start small. Keep it simple. I love the saying, that low-hanging fruit. What's a win that would make both organizations or both departments, if it's internal, trust me, there's enough strife in some large organizations that internally it's tough enough. What's going to be a mutual benefit that allows you to move something forward at a fairly steady pace, and then you can come out of that and say, hey, we could actually work together on something bigger. Right? There's something about having a first dance, a first date, right? Test it out. You don't necessarily want to quote unquote get married right out of the gate. Check it out, test it out, do something small, manage that approach, keep it simple. One bonus little element to that, this is specifically for any of the smaller organizations out there, particularly startups. If you're working with a big, large multinational, find the person who can navigate that for you. They're there, they exist. They'll help you find out who owns the purse strings, who makes the decisions, who's got the KPIs, what their lawyers are looking for, which they can only use FedEx or Purelator, whatever kind of crazy stuff you run into that can just derail. And I know any of you small organizations have hit these roadblocks. Find your golden navigator. They're so important. They're not easy to find. In some cases, they don't exist. But if you've got one, hitch to that, okay? Facilitate clarity, which is one of the other ones that was the leading in the poll. This sounds simple too, but I think oftentimes people will get into a collaboration without actually underlying what they want out of it. And I mean like black and white what you want out of it, not let's get better or let's improve or let's do something together. No, what's the number that you want to move? Is it a volume? Is it a profit margin? Is it a food safety thing? Is it a speed? Need something. If you can't sort of put it on a piece of paper, it's not going to work. And I fully believe you need to be transparent. Sometimes this can be cat and mouse. And that's not really a good setup for collaboration either. That seems kind of like one's at odds with the other. It's almost like if you can pull the wool over their eyes a little bit, you might get something out of it. It's okay if they get something. No, you really should be thinking about what you need, what the other organizations needs, and if those don't align, then you're going to have, someone really has to concede in that situation, and they're going to have to be comfortable with it. Otherwise, you're going to be battling against that all the way, right? Clear conditions of satisfaction. Within that is also clearly defined roles and responsibilities, right? How many times have you been in those, even simple ones? Well, I didn't know we were supposed to ship a sample. I thought you were paying for the testing. Well, our pilot facility has a bigger priority with our internal project. Okay, what's that mean now, right? You may even want to find a third party to help you facilitate this. That exists out there, right? You can find people to help you with that. Sometimes bringing a consultant into the mix can also help neutralize sort of the two camps side. 4, dedicate time. It's the simplest one on here, but maybe the one that I think is abused the most. If people don't put something in their calendar, it's not going to get done. If a collaboration is a side of desk activity, you're going to get side of desk results. It's garbage, right? At the end of the day. Maybe you'll get lucky. Or maybe you end up in what I'll call a collaboration that's fully one-sided and the other group drives you to a success because they're desperate, right? Or whatever is needed, okay? You got to make time to do this or make the time available to the people that you manage to do this. And it has to be clear. That's part of that facilitate clarity, but it's also within the dedicated time. There's a nuance to this too. They also have to understand what their autonomy is and authority around that because they're going to be behaving differently, right? The other piece to dedicating time, and you guys are here, so this is one thing that you're already doing, is you got to get outside of your space. You can't go and collaborate if you're behind your own desk in your own organization, in your own office, or in your own home office. It doesn't happen accidentally. Yeah, serendipity every once in a while. But you actually actively have to collaborate. Even at the earliest stage, before it's even a collaboration, there is time dedicated to nurturing that and getting it moving. But there's also dedicated time to unloading it at the end, right? You got to make the time all the way along. And if that's not clear, it's going to fall at one of those milestones. So just consider that question. If you want to collaborate, are you going to dedicate the time? Make the time. We're all busy. That's the easy answer. Your calendar's probably booked from now until 2025. So then if you're not going to put something in that calendar, is it going to happen? Right? Or find somebody to put it in the calendar. The last one's my favorite because it's sort of the hardest to measure. And that's the right people. And we all know this, right? Intuitively. We all know that getting the right people is the difference maker in a collaboration. We've probably even been part of some of those disastrous collaborations where they've been rescued by a people swap, right? Potentially one or two where there's just a clash. That happens. It's human nature. There's no commentary about that. But I do think it's very important to find and try and get the right people together on this. Some people are gifted at collaborating. Some people are gifted at the nurturing of the collaboration. Some are gifted at executing it. Some are more gifted at closing it out. So you might even need to switch it as you go along. But finding the right people is important. And again, the clarity of their roles is super important in that. So as you go out to collaborate, even ask yourself, am I the right person for this? Or am I the right person for this milestone? Be honest, right? If you really want success, sometimes you're going to have to make those decisions, right? And it isn't about bad or good or anything like that. It's about getting the right results. But this one is certainly the most difficult to force. So again, I think most of those are pretty straightforward, pretty simple. But if you don't consider them almost a little bit like a playbook, and if any one of those sort of slips away, you can see how each one of those can be wedges, right? Or they can be catalysts. But wait, I got a bonus for you. And I like this one. First, caveat, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, okay? And I love working with lawyers, by the way. It actually can be quite fun. I say that in an odd way, but it is true. Do not let legal be your roadblock. It can be a building block. And I mean specifically two ways. I'm going to give you two examples of this. The first one I call it is the initial death by NDA. How many of you have been in a meeting, the very first meeting, and they go, nice to meet you, here's my NDA. Possibly one-sided NDA, boilerplate, purpose is for who the hell knows what, right? And particularly if you're a small organization, you're thrust down your throat, this NDA. You maybe put one red line on it, give it back, and now it turns into the cogs of the big machine, and 6 months later, it probably got another 10 red lines on its own language. And you go, what the heck? I just wanted to find out if you guys are interested in plant-based proteins. I didn't want to, actually sell anything to you yet or do a collab. Avoid the death by NDA, and there's a way to do that. I think being transparent right up front, and this works on both sides, say something along the lines of, I do not want to hear anything confidential in our first conversation or conversations. Let's not go there yet. Pause, no NDA. We are not going to breach anything. But let's have a conversation of what we think this might be, especially in the early days. Because then if you can start to determine where this collaboration might go and what the purpose of it is, that NDA is also going to be easier, and that NDA is going to have backing by your partner, right? When it's just an NDA being checked back and forth, it goes into that weird void. Which brings me to the second piece on this one is, do not let the lawyers or the legal team be your negotiators in the collaboration. That's lazy, first of all. If you can't negotiate in your collaboration with the person you're working with, it's already a bad relationship. But if you use your lawyers to do it, their sole purpose is to defend your turf. That's what they want to do. They're paid to do that. Kudos to them. You need that, right? They've got to figure out that if a nuclear bomb goes off and the moon crashed into the sun tomorrow and this is what was left over, you're still protected. Great. Is that going to happen? No, you could probably take a little bit of organizational risk on that one, right? But if you let the lawyers, particularly if you pay a third-party lawyer, and if any of you are lawyers out there, I apologize, but if you pay them to go through a legal document, they're paid to redline it. Of course they're going to come back with red lines. If you find one that doesn't, stick with them. They probably are understanding something about your business. That's interesting, right? Have a conversation about that. Do not let the lawyers pass back to their lawyers, and then all of a sudden, 3 weeks, 6 weeks later, you've got two lawyers having a very legalese conversation. You don't even know if you're talking about collaboration anymore. Use it as a tool. Agree to what the purpose of the collaboration is going to be, where you're going, what the conditions of satisfaction are, and that document will become easier. It's never going to be smooth. That's okay. That's the point. But this can be a building block or a roadblock, depending upon your approach. So that's sort of my little bonus one on that. And as you didn't catch that, a bit of a passion point for me, because I've been on both sides of that equation. So with that, I'd like to just invite everybody who wants to learn some more about CFIN. We have a booth out there. You can scan the QR code. Hopefully, got some tips, something that makes you think a little bit about how to collaborate that you maybe haven't heard or put into that context before. And so with that, I'm just going to open the floor to any questions or conversation or discussion you may want to have. Any questions or comments from anybody? Any horror stories? Those are always fun. Yeah, Melinda.
Hi. Thank you. That was very inspiring.
Good, thanks.
2 pages of notes.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
I didn't even have 2 pages of notes. I did something okay, I guess.
I was actually coming up with ideas while you were talking.
Yeah.
That's how inspiring.
Good.
So thank you so much. So I'm just wondering if lawyers will resist your involvement. Will they say, well, you don't know what you're doing and you're just going to slow us down? Or like what happens when you say that the lawyers that want to be involved in it?
So my experience is I built a really good rapport with, at the particular large CPG I was working at, I picked a good rapport with the lawyer. So I had a really good relationship with them that I developed outside of projects. Fantastic guys. I just really quite like them. And we butted heads a ton. That never stopped. He was always a lawyer, right? That was his job. But he also, most of them want you there as well because they are also flying blind and just kind of pulling boilerplate stuff to chuck at it that are usually the broadest as, I mean, from your position, you always want to go broad as possible, right? You want to protect as much as you can with as much authority as you can. And then they try and work backwards, right, in general. And I think what you can do is accelerate how to work that backwards. What you're willing to concede is within the risk tolerance of your business. And that's not easy for some very large organizations because you may or may not have that authority. But in smaller ones, you certainly do. And you have to be kind of realistic about it. So I've found, for the most part, that they want you in on that to bring the business sense because it should strengthen it. I think they actually, from my experience most of the time, will cringe a little bit when they know that you're asking them to do your job for them, to negotiate. And sometimes that just becomes back up against the wall, I'm not going to budge kind of stuff. Yes?
Joe, great presentation.
Thank you.
You've probably seen large collaborations and small collaborations. What can you tell us from your experiences, sort of the ideal size and
Oh.
scope of really effective collaboration in terms of customers, technology providers, what's an ideal one to look like?
That's a great question. And my gut knee-jerk reaction is bigger is always more challenging. The more player, the more, cooks in the kitchen, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of saying is fairly accurate. So quite frankly, the more you get into the collaboration, the more difficult that becomes because you've just got so many agendas to deal with. And those things like clarity become so super important, right? I think it's, the easiest collaborations are when you've got two really aligned organizations that understand what they bring to the table and what they want to get out of it. That's usually the most simple. And again, a less complex one that you're kind of a low-hanging fruit makes most sense. Now, that doesn't mean I'm suggesting that's the only kind of collaboration you should do. I think some of those big, hairy ones are probably worthwhile when you get into them. I've had bad luck personally with like consortium type stuff, right? That gets real tricky, particularly when you start throwing in, say, corporates and academics and not-for-profits and those kinds of things. Different ways of approaching law and knowledge sharing and all those kinds of things like that.
Okay, so that's helpful. So you're not advocating polygamy in terms of
Yep.
collaboration.
Not unless it makes sense, right? You really got to want something out of it, I think, is my take. There's others that are going to have different views on that, and I think there's many organizations that exist on those big collaborations, and that's great. And I would always suggest too, if you're trying to do something, look at other models. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that's also a bad approach. Try and see how it's worked with others. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One of the questions I'm dealing with respect to lawyers get involved because they're trying to protect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes confidential information. Now, with respect to YODL, you get back to your hub that you have.
Yeah.
How do you encourage confidentiality, openness of communication between someone who really wants to understand the organization help protect that information from going viral or being misused?
So here's what I would say. It is a public forum. Registration is free, membership is free. If you don't want that out there, I wouldn't put it there. That's the first thing we would say. If somebody wants to then break off into an individual conversation, you can have those, and that's protected in there. And we have our privacy agreements on there. We can discuss those in specific detail out there. But yeah, I think I would approach that in the same way, even as I said at the beginning, is I wouldn't be spraying confidential information even in one-on-one conversations that you're having in the flesh, unless you're comfortable to get to that part, right? If it's public, if it's out there, if it's in a patent, if it's in published research, go for it, right? I think it's more about getting the first linkage, and then you can sort of break off and have those conversations as you need. And we may look to, that's a great question, in the future, if there are things like trying to shop some IP or something along those lines, well, maybe we can have some specific forums designed where there is some protection in there, or coming in that you have to sign an agreement. I think I'm out of time here, Constance. Okay, if you have any other questions, though, corner me somewhere here, and I'm sure I'll give you an answer. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wow. Oh, thank you so much.
And sometimes the players on teams are not necessarily the ones that have the best talent, but the ones that can get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, am I on? Okay, so please make your way to Plaza B, Montreal A and B, and Toronto A and B. And the supplier showcase will start in a few minutes also. Again, thank you very much for being here. Greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate the support too.